Have you ever had an idea so powerful, so impossible, that the very thought of saying it out loud made your heart race? Not because it was wrong, but because you knew the world wasn't ready to hear it. This is the story of a woman who dared to speak that kind of truth. A story not just about machines or engines or equations, but about identity, belief, and defiance. And it starts in a place most world-changing stories never do, under the hood of a car, with a wrench in one hand and the weight of the world in the other. Emily Carter wasn't a name anyone knew. She wasn't a child prodigy, a startup founder, or a media darling. She was the kind of person you walk past without noticing, the kind of person people assume is just part of the background. At 29, she was already used to being dismissed by her town, by her employers, even by the men whose cars she fixed better than they ever could. But invisibility has a strange power. It allows you to build in silence, to learn without judgment, and to create something no one else would dare attempt because no one expects it from you. In a crumbling garage on the outskirts of a forgotten New Jersey town, Emily was quietly challenging the laws of physics. Literally. She was building an engine the world had already decided was impossible, a self-sustaining machine that didn't need fuel, didn't emit smoke, and didn't answer to the rules of combustion. A closed loop, perpetual motion, not electric, not solar, not wind-powered, but something else entirely. Of course, anyone with a science degree will tell you that's nonsense, and they'd be right on paper. Every engineering textbook written in the last 200 years says it's not possible, but every revolution begins with a rule someone was bold enough to break. And Emily, she had nothing left to lose. She wasn't driven by fame or fortune or some genius complex. She was driven by something far more powerful, the need to prove that the truth doesn't care where it comes from, that brilliance doesn't require credentials, that you can carry genius in a body the world refuses to see. When she walked into the headquarters of Vidian Motors, a soaring tower of chrome and ego, it wasn't as an engineer. It was as a nobody, a mechanic with oil-stained jeans and a dream in her hands. The only clean thing she carried that day was a leather portfolio worn and creased from years of obsession. Inside it, blueprints, formulas, dreams pressed flat on graph paper. No one expected her. No one welcomed her. And when she stood in front of Alexander Pierce, the billionaire CEO, whose suits were worth more than her yearly salary, he didn't see an inventor. He saw a maintenance worker in the wrong elevator. But fate is rarely polite. The moment he saw her plans, his entire demeanor shifted. And not because of pity, because he saw it. The math, the design, the audacity of what she'd drawn. Alexander Pierce, a man who built his empire on combustion and conformity, saw something new in that pile of pages, something that whispered this could change everything. Here's where most stories would leap into a Cinderella arc, but real life doesn't hand you a happy ending just because you shock a CEO. Know what came next was far more complicated, because with recognition comes resistance. Emily was invited into the inner circle. Overnight, she went from obscurity to obsession. Vidian gave her a lab, a team, and a mandate to perform miracles on demand. But miracles don't work on a schedule, and the more Emily succeeded, the more enemies she made. This is a truth most people don't understand until they face it themselves. The system doesn't fear failure, it fears disruption. If your success makes others obsolete, they won't applaud. They'll retaliate. And that's exactly what happened. One engineer in particular, Logan Reed, saw Emily not as a partner, but as a threat. For years, he had been the golden boy, the one whose patents justified Vidian's arrogance. And here came a woman with no degree, no pedigree, and a device that could rewrite every rule he'd ever built his name on. It's important to pause here and understand something crucial. Sabotage doesn't always come with explosives or drama. It can come quietly in the dead of night disguised as a small calibration error, a misaligned bolt, a data file corrupted in just the right way. And when it does, it's almost impossible to prove. 3 days before the biggest demonstration of her life, Emily's engine was sabotaged, and no one knew, least of all her. She walked into that boardroom with hope in her heart and certainty in her hands. Her prototype was perfect, her calculations flawless. She had run tests all night, but when she powered it on for the board of directors, nothing. A sputter, a grind, then silence. That silence was deafening, not just in sound, but in consequence. The room shifted. Hope turned into doubt. Trust evaporated. And Emily, once a whisper of genius, became a cautionary tale. And this is where most people would stop. But Emily didn't. Because here's the part that no one talks about. Greatness is not measured by the applause you get when things go right, but by the choices you make when everything falls apart. She could have walked away, let her engine die in that room, blame the pressure, the stress, the expectations. Instead, she dug deeper. She found allies where she least expected them. Maria Kim, a young intern with no power but plenty of guts, ran simulations and discovered the truth: Emily's prototype hadn't failed. It had been sabotaged, deliberately, specifically, by someone who knew exactly how to make it look like an accident. That's when the second story began. The first was about genius. The second was about justice. Emily didn't scream. She didn't rant. She didn't even file a formal complaint. Instead, she did what engineers do best: she rebuilt. She tested. She doubled her security, rewrote her plans, and created a version of the engine even better than the one Logan had destroyed. And when Alexander Pierce returned, contract in hand, apology on his lips, offering her $1 billion for exclusive rights to her design, she saw the truth written between the lines. They didn't want to build her engine. They wanted to bury it. Because a fuel-free engine doesn't just threaten one company, it threatens an entire worldview. Industries built on scarcity can't survive abundance. Markets driven by consumption can't profit from sustainability. Emily saw that, and she chose something no one expected. She said no. She turned her back on safety, on comfort, on an empire, and she built her own. Emily's refusal wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. She had seen what power looked like up close, and it wore expensive suits and friendly smiles while quietly closing doors behind your back. She wasn't naive anymore. She understood that taking their money meant surrendering the soul of her invention, and she had built it not to sell, but to serve. So she walked away from the offer and into the unknown. What happened next was not magic, it was movement. She created her own company, not funded by venture capitalists or billion-dollar hedge funds, but by everyday people, scientists, dreamers, skeptics, and single parents who saw in her engine a new kind of hope. Within weeks, her crowdfunding campaign hit milestones most startups can only dream of. People didn't just donate, they rallied. Because this wasn't about tech anymore. It was about trust, about the belief that ordinary individuals could create extraordinary change when the gatekeepers are removed. And this belief, it spread like wildfire. Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video if you believe the best love stories start with honesty. Subscribe our channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day. Let's talk real life for a second. In 2012, a 15-year-old named Jack Andraka developed a revolutionary test for pancreatic cancer using just Google and public research databases. He was rejected by over 199 labs before one finally gave him a chance. His test was 400 times more sensitive than the gold standard at the time. But he wasn't a PhD. He wasn't in the system. And for a while, no one took him seriously. Sound familiar? Emily's story reflects a broader truth. We've created a world where gatekeeping masquerades as quality control, where credentials are confused with capability, where power listens only to those it already recognizes. And yet history keeps repeating this pattern. The greatest breakthroughs come from the people standing just outside the room. At the New York Technology Conference 6 months after she was fired, Emily stood on stage not as a victim, not as a prodigy, but as a leader. She didn't bring fanfare or flash. She brought facts. She brought proof. Her improved engine ran cleanly, silently, beautifully, powering a laptop, a row of lights, a small heater. All without fuel, all without pause. But what electrified the room wasn't the machine. It was her presence. The same boardrooms that had scoffed now sat silent, watching a woman they had once dismissed redefine their future. Investors who previously passed on her now scrambled to schedule meetings. Engineering students whispered her name with reverence, and the press, once indifferent, now tripped over themselves for exclusives. Still, Emily didn't change her core values. Instead of patenting everything and locking her discovery behind corporate walls, she released portions of her design open source. Why? Because real progress doesn't grow behind paywalls. It thrives in community. She called her company True Torque not just as a nod to mechanics, but as a statement: real change needs force, real power needs direction, and truth, it doesn't wait for permission. Alexander Pierce was in the audience that day, in the back row, quieter than usual. When the Q&A opened, he stood, his voice once commanding, now humbled. He acknowledged his mistakes. He didn't beg for forgiveness, he earned it by showing up. That in itself mattered. And yet this wasn't his story anymore. It never was. This was Emily's. And Emily never made it about revenge. She made it about resolve. When her former garage manager, Chloe Maddox, the one who once hired her as a diversity stunt, reached out months later, Emily didn't hang up. She listened. She accepted the apology. Then she offered Chloe's garage a license to service True Torque engines. Because dignity isn't just about standing tall. It's about knowing when to lift others with you. By the one-year mark, True Torque had expanded into a full-scale facility. Engines rolled off the assembly line and into shipping crates destined for schools, clinics, off-grid farms, and developing nations. Places that big energy companies had always deemed too small, too poor, or too complicated to serve. In villages where children once did homework by candlelight, they now studied beneath LEDs powered by a humming little device born in a New Jersey garage. This is what happens when we stop trying to win the game and start rewriting the rules. Now let's zoom out. Look around you. How many Emilys do you know? People with brilliance but no platform. People with answers but no audience. People who've heard you're not qualified more times than they've heard you're right. We've built a society where potential is often buried under bias, where innovation is stifled by ego. But the good news: change doesn't require a billion-dollar budget. It starts when we notice the invisible, when we believe in someone before their prototype works, when we ask not where did you go to school, but what have you built? And Emily built more than an engine. She built a movement that whispered, maybe it's not the loudest voice that wins, but the one that refuses to be silenced. A movement that dared to ask, what if we stopped protecting industries and started protecting ideas? What if the next energy revolution didn't come from a Silicon Valley unicorn, but from a woman with grease under her fingernails and nothing left to prove? Let me tell you something. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're not good enough, that your idea won't work, that you're just a mechanic or a student or a dreamer, you're in good company. Because people said the same thing to Emily Carter, and now they're buying her engines. There's a reason why this story sticks with us. It's not just the underdog theme or the cool science or the billion-dollar twist. It's the reminder that belief in ourselves and in others is the first engine of all. And the truth, most revolutions don't begin in laboratories. They begin in garages, in quiet apartments, in notebooks never shared, in conversations like this one where someone hears a story and thinks, if she did it, maybe I can too. The first production line at True Torque wasn't perfect. Nothing revolutionary ever is. There were bugs, delays, and moments of fear. The demand was overwhelming. Orders came from nonprofits, refugee camps, tech entrepreneurs, and even skeptical governments. But Emily didn't back down. She built a team. She trained engineers who had never been given a shot before, single mothers, veterans, people with criminal records, people who'd been passed over for all the wrong reasons, because she remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. And she vowed never to become the kind of leader who forgot. There's a quiet irony in watching the very industry that rejected you now racing to catch up. Logan Reed, once the symbol of institutional superiority, now found himself marginalized. His sabotage exposed his reputation, ruined not by retaliation, but by simple truth. Vidian distanced itself from him quickly, a silent admission that they'd backed the wrong horse. Alexander Pierce, to his credit, kept his word. Though Emily had rejected his buyout offer, he later proposed a manufacturing partnership, one with full transparency, no ownership strings, and full control left in Emily's hands. True Torque would remain independent, but leverage Vidian's global infrastructure to scale production. Emily agreed, but only on one condition: all patents would remain open source for humanitarian applications. No one would own the right to clean energy, not even her. In the years that followed, True Torque didn't just grow, it redefined what energy innovation looked like. Instead of chasing profits, it chased possibilities. And the world responded. Schools in sub-Saharan Africa ran computers without needing diesel generators. Remote hospitals in mountain villages lit up operating rooms for the first time. Entire neighborhoods in low-income areas installed microgrids powered by a single True Torque engine, bypassing the need for utility companies entirely. Each new application was a middle finger to the status quo that once said this can't be done. And through it all, Emily stayed grounded. She still wore her old mechanic's boots to the office. She still kept a photo of her mother taped above her workbench. She still took time to mentor young girls in STEM programs. Because no matter how far she rose, she never forgot where she started or how close she came to being silenced forever. There's something poetic about that kind of legacy, not just building something extraordinary, but doing it in a way that makes others believe they can too. Emily once said, "The most powerful thing I ever built wasn't the engine. It was the version of me that stopped waiting for permission." And maybe that's the truth we all need to hear. We're taught to wait, to earn approval, to play small until someone says it's our turn. But Emily didn't wait. She walked into a skyscraper with nothing but a folder full of dreams. She got knocked down, humiliated, betrayed. But she stood back up. She looked at the people who said she couldn't, and she built it anyway. So ask yourself, what idea have you been afraid to share? What blueprint lives in your mind that you keep folded up because you think no one will care? Maybe you're the next Emily Carter. Maybe your garage is where the next revolution begins. Maybe today is the day you stop asking for validation and start building anyway. This story at its core isn't about engines. It's about energy, human energy, the force that wakes you up in the middle of the night with a sketch in your head, the spark that won't let you sleep until you try, the kind of belief that isn't loud but unshakable. And if you've ever felt unseen, unappreciated, underestimated, take heart, because it means you're in the same company as every world changer who ever lived. You don't need permission. You need conviction and maybe a little bit of grease under your nails. So here's the takeaway. Never let the world define your ceiling. Never let rejection convince you that your idea doesn't matter. The next world-changing solution isn't waiting in a boardroom. It's waiting in someone like you. Emily Carter taught us that. She proved that truth is louder than sabotage. That character outlasts credentials. That when you believe deeply enough in what you've built, the world will eventually catch up, even if it's kicking and screaming the whole way there. If this story stirred something in you, don't let that feeling fade. Do something with it. Sketch your blueprint. Launch your idea. Write your first line of code. Share your vision. Start your engine. Because the world isn't changed by the people who play it safe. It's changed by the ones who refuse to be ignored. Thanks for staying with us until the end. If this story moved you, made you think, consider sharing it with someone who might need it today. Subscribe our channel for more powerful stories about love, self-growth, and human connection, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next emotional journey.